And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
It was 1776 when the founders signed the writ of independence from the Brits. It was revolution.
Welcome to the Republic News Network live national broadcast. You may call me Kelby, and tonight I'm going to be acting as your moderator. This is the 7th of July 2016. Ladies and gentlemen, happy 4th of July. Tonight's featured RNN show is Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. The RNN, which stands for the Republic News Network, has been doing this radio show for over 6 years, and it's always been a friendly introduction to the people of the United States Corporation. It's true, the United States is a federal corporation, and their exclusive jurisdiction lies within the District of Columbia. You can find this information in the law, Title 28, Section 3002, and UCC 9-307H. The Republic government was just a bunch of U.S. citizens that realized they wanted to be Americans, as our founders intended. We have been hard at work now for 8 years and have successfully re-inhabited the original government vacated under Lincoln in 1861. I know it's hard to understand, don't worry. We are nothing but law-abiding, peaceful Americans and very pro-government. You can consider the Republic members are tired of all the corruption that we see every day. See, we found in the law that there is in fact two forms of government here in our land, and we did something about it. We are people. Mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, we have families just like you. We simply found some truths, and now we're sharing these important truths with the rest of the world. So get ready to hear things that sound amazing. And get ready to understand that you too can be a part of history. We welcome each one of you to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel and the Republic for the United States of America. Before we go into tonight's broadcast, please bow your head in prayer. Father God, we need you. We praise you. This nation is hurting. Lord, help us to understand submitting our nation back at your feet, Lord. Help us with our problems. Help us with the corruption at the top. Help us with understanding what we need to do to re-inhabit this republic from state by state, county by county, and how we need to operate in the private under you, Lord, as our founders intended. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen. Mr. Dan Happel, I yield the floor to you, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the honor today of having two guests on our show that will be folks that are talking about the issue of the American rancher, a conservationist profile, and how our American West is being changed and has been changed over the last 25 years from a very free and very open society, and it is being changed into really a very controlled society, and a lot of the farmers and ranchers and natural resource producers are being taken off the land that they were responsible for developing and caring for. So that is the gist of our show today. Jim White, who happens to be a very good friend of mine, and we've worked together over the past years. Jim is the founder of a organization called Northwest Liberty News, and he's broken off into a new program, and I will allow him to talk about that shortly. But I also have on the call Cliff Gardner, and Cliff is a rancher from Nevada, and he is very deeply involved with the loss of our rights through the public federal agency kind of takeover of the West, or at least they're exerting a lot more power. And he's got a group called the Rural Heritage Preservation Project, and so we'll be talking about those things today. I just would like to lead into that with the fact that over the next approximately 6 weeks, we're going to have a series of discussions that will talk about what is happening in our country and how it all ties together. And, of course, that will be in the form of trying to connect the dots for our listeners. So with that said, Jim, would you tell our listeners a bit about your background, Northwest Liberty News, your broadcasting career, and the reasons that you started this new Operation Wildlife Rescue project?
Well, Dan, first of all, I want to say thank you so very much for taking the time to have me on your broadcast. I certainly appreciate you and the work that you've done. And yes, indeed, we are friends and have worked together in the past and done some great work, I think, as far as the information, getting your information out. I really quickly, I really came to Montana a few years back. I left Michigan. I felt called, spirit-led to come out here to Montana. My wife and I really dropped everything, left Michigan, and came out here just about 5 years ago. Started from nothing. We didn't know anybody, had a place to live, or have a job, or had never been here before. I worked for about a year in computer technology because that's what my background was. And then I actually quit that job. It was a gainful employment. I quit that job again. 2 jobs I quit, really good jobs in a year, because I just had this, burning desire to really to get the word out and to educate people, because I saw the condition that our nation, was heading. And I have 2 daughters. And, I realized that no one is going to have their best interest but me at heart. So I launched Northwest Liberty News. Never really had done anything like this before. Didn't really have, I'd taken videos on my phone like anybody else, but I really self-taught myself how to shoot video, edit, really researched and studied film and filmmaking and lighting and sound and everything that goes with it. And I just started showing up at events here by my house and recording the events. They were just not really very exciting. They were just speakers, but they were putting out good info. And I just kept posting on my YouTube channel, and I started writing articles, and one thing led to another, and I started broadcasting, which I did for a couple of years. I started off on the Liberty Brothers with my co-host Jason Van Tatenhove. It all got kicked off when I went down to the Bundy Ranch down in Nevada. I was down there, interviewed Cliven, who Cliff knows Cliven very well, and his family. And I was down there in Bundy Ranch, and that really sort of, my reports down there really kind of, I guess, for lack of better terms, and don't want to sound immodest when I say this, but it sort of launched my career. From that point on, I just got on the radio and started broadcasting, and I just hung up my microphone just about a month ago. Again, I felt that on my heart, we had Jeanette Finicum come right here to Montana, up in Plains, Montana, and she gave a speech. It was a very heartfelt, very, very tear-filled speech that even is very difficult for me to even watch even now. I interviewed her, or I actually videotaped her. I posted it on my YouTube channel, Northwest Liberty News, and it inspired me. When someone came up to me and said, Jim, there's people that are not just in Montana that need your help. There's people all around ranchers that need your help. So that comment from this person that I'd never met before that made this comment to me, coupled with the fact that, I watched Jeanette Finicum's very gripping account of her husband, in my view, being murdered. It really inspired me to, believe it or not, I hung up the microphone. I contacted Michelle Fiore, who's a friend of mine, who I think you know Michelle as well, Dan. I contacted Michelle Fiore and asked who could I contact, who could she put me in touch with, that I could actually start really focusing on the ranchers and the plight of the ranchers, because it's just the elephant in the room. Everybody knows that these ranchers are getting really railroaded and really, I think, in my opinion, forced off their property, but no one is standing up for them. No one. They're going after these guys one by one and like picking them off one by one, and by design, and they don't have a voice. So I called Cliff, who's our other guest here, Cliff. Cliff, I called Cliff. Michelle said, give Cliff a call, Gardner a call. I called Cliff. He started, he's been an activist, and he's been fighting this battle for many, many years, has a lot of contacts. He's a great writer in his own right. He set me up with a few ranchers, and quite a few, and I had some really, really great interviews. It's called Operation Wildlife Rescue, and I'm really, really delighted to be working with Cliff Gardner, and heading back to Nevada here in a couple days, and going to be doing some more interviews and just getting the
Hello.
Hello.
Point of order. I think we lost him.
Okay. All right. Well, Kelby, we can straighten that up. Are you back on, Jim?
This is Cliff.
Oh, okay. Cliff, you're on. Cliff, would you mind giving us a little bit of background on yourself, and then talk to us a little about your Rural Heritage Preservation Project? And we will use this opportunity to pick up the other line.
Sorry about that. I got kicked off. I apologize about that. I'm not sure how much of it you heard, but I'm back now. This is the third time I get kicked off. I may have to switch over to my mobile phone if it happens again.
Okay, Jim. If we can stop right there, then I will go ahead. We just mentioned to Cliff that he was going to have to fill in. So with that, Cliff, can you give us a little bit about your background and the Rural Heritage Preservation Project, and how you are really documenting a lot of the issues that are happening around the West, and how these federal agencies are reacting and how they are acting? If you would elaborate with that, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I appreciate this opportunity. Well, I'd like to start back and tell a little bit about my youth. I was born in a very rural area in northeastern Nevada, a long ways from town. We only went to town once or twice or maybe 3 times in my boyhood, and we went to a little school. The smallest number of people to attend in any one year was 2 of us. But mostly I grew up with a lot of Indian children, Shoshone children, and I would suppose that because of that I adopted somewhat of their philosophy, their way of looking at life. And in addition, we spent a tremendous amount of time entertaining ourselves, tromping through the bogs and out in the sagebrush, and I think we were very much a part of nature. And I've always appreciated that kind of background. But there was nothing I ever wanted to do more than be a rancher. And so I attended high school 60 miles away and was boarded out, and only looked forward to that day when I would graduate from high school and be a free person, as I looked at it. And that's all I ever wanted, was to run cattle and have a rural livelihood. But then, as I started gaining management responsibility on the ranch, beginning very early in life, I had the experience of being exposed to some people that were involved in the Ruby Lake National Wildlife Refuge, which was adjacent to our ranching operation. We ran livestock there and had been for even before the refuge had been created. And in the 1960s particularly, there was more and more employees that were being brought out to the refuge, young biologists, assistant managers, those type of people that were not so different from myself in age. And it was at the time when the environmental movement, I suppose, was just coming off and being launched. And I heard these young people talking a lot about how cattle were bad and how we had to, even back at that time, they were talking about the needs of sage-grouse. And what they were telling me was not correlating with what I had experienced in my lifetime, being around cattle and wildlife. In fact, as a young person, I was very interested in birds particularly and had an extensive egg collection. And so I began asking these individuals where they were getting their data. Could I have copies of it? So my efforts in starting to collect scientific studies at that time, it really began very early. But then later I got involved politically here in the state of Nevada with other people that were concerned. And then in the 1980s, when serving as Vice President of Nevada Farm Bureau, there became a planning process brought about in central Nevada by the Toyobe National Forest that implemented regulations that told people they had to remove their livestock when there was no more than 45% utilization on the riparian areas. Well, again, we could see no justification, and so my involvement politically became more intense. And so one of the things I was able to accomplish at that time was that we passed a resolution through State Farm Bureau asking the University of Nevada to go back and find all the studies, all the science, all the history that showed that where livestock, in fact, were beneficial to wildlife. And because I was associated with people involved in the Nevada Cattlemen's Association, we were able to get a like resolution through that organization asking for the same thing. Well, nothing occurred. The request was put in, and the university at that time just ignored our request, and so it was shortly after that that I determined that I would collect all the scientific and historical information that I could possibly get my hands on to counter what was going on and educate myself. And it was not long in this effort that I've been getting on recovering numerous data showing that, in fact, I was right. In fact, what the federal agency people were doing in removing those livestock from these federal refuges, particularly, was detrimental to almost every species of wildlife, whether it was rodents or snakes or bug production, invertebrate production, or directly related to wildlife production, waterfowl production. It was more and more obvious. And so anyway, the people I was associated with during those times encouraged me to put together a library. So now I perhaps have one of the largest libraries in the western United States that entails and includes all of the earliest scientific studies. Many of them have been suppressed intentionally and by the agency people, and you cannot find any longer. So I have all one section of this library that has all the scientific information in it. I have another section that deals with articles and the history, local and state and local histories and issues that have been ongoing. Plus, I went back and over a long period of time collected all of the earliest logs and diaries and records kept by all of the earliest explorers and trappers that came into the West. And that has been one of the most interesting aspects because it shows that the wildlife production wasn't optimum at the time of earliest exploration, but the opposite was the case. And since that time, as we settled the areas and run more livestock, there's been a corresponding increase in wildlife numbers and production. And now here more recently with the politics of the federal agencies over the last 20, 30 years, where they've systematically reduced predator control and taken livestock off of various ranges and refuges, we've got a corresponding reduction in numbers of wildlife. So that is a short background of and then more recently, because I put this science together these last 4 years, I wrote articles that were published in 2 different publications here in the state of Nevada that use a lot of the data and statistics that I have put together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so that's my background.
With that said, too, I have to mention the fact that I've been involved as a county commissioner in southwest Montana, and one of the things that they're working on up here is they were working on the relisting of the sage grouse. Or listing the sage grouse, I should say, as an endangered species. And the process, we've actually kept that listing from happening through various state agencies, but the reality is that they've accomplished pretty much the same thing as a full listing would accomplish. And the reality is, after we've done some studies on it, the sage grouse numbers were at their peak during the 1940s, 50s, and 60s when predator control was happening in a big way, and when sheep and cattle were at their highest numbers on the open range. So you're right. There's a lot of evidence that in the process of running livestock and humans off the land, they're actually accomplishing the exact opposite of what they claim that they're accomplishing. Jim, I want to ask you, you've done a lot of study on this, I know, over the years. Would you like to discuss how tax-exempt foundations and environmental groups who are kind of working together have inserted their anti-ranching positions into federal policies through political influence? They seem to be able to insert money and people at an agency level, and they've made a big impact on the federal agencies. Could you kind of elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, sure. You know, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, good. I switched phones. Yeah, Dan, you know, this is not something that, this has been going on for years, and what you see is, unfortunately, the unfortunate truth of the matter is the other side is not necessarily more well-funded, but certainly more well-organized than we are. It's often been said that you know, people on our side of the fence, we can agree on 95% of everything. It's that 5% that divides us. On the other side of the fence, they can disagree on 95% of everything, but that 5% they all come together on, and they really end up, you know, beating the pants off us every single time. So what has happened is, you've had minority groups. We're unfortunately, Dan, we're in the age of where the minority rules. A very, very small percentage of the population have used the courts. They've used the courts, and they've taken a long time to get judges and, you know, really activist judges. There's a judge here specifically in Montana, Dan, I know that you know. He comes out of retirement to make these rulings against the good citizens of Montana repeatedly. So they have these activist judges, and they're fairly well funded on the other side, and they do is they get their people in positions of authority and with their ideology, and yes, Dan, they move them towards the top because they're much like they do in universities, and much like, you know, it's and I hate to sound like too conspiratorial, but you know, it really is a larger program. You know, there really is a larger program going on here that we could discuss at another point. But no, these small, really minority groups, Dan, have managed to usurp really the will of most of the people through the courts and through activist judges. And really, you see it going on here with Target. You see it going on, you know, in society now. It's just what they've been doing to the ranchers. They're now moving into mainstream, and you're seeing it come into the mainstream media now. But it's the same program, the same playbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that it's a lot of the big tax-exempt foundations are the ones that are funding these environmental groups. And it's a money game. But the thing that's interesting is that the tax-exempt foundations, and a lot of them have been in existence for 100 years, are funding things that and organizations that are anti-development, anti-corporate, let's say, American free market system. And a lot of these foundations were put together by people that had really been pioneers in the oil industry and steel and a lot of the natural resource industries. And yet they've skewed the target, I guess, or the direction of these foundations, and now they're putting money into some of the most radical programs in the country. And Cliff, have you run across that kind of a group in Nevada? Because I know we've certainly seen them up here in Montana.
Yes, we've had a lot of first-hand experience. back in the 1980s, the mining industry changed dramatically within the state of Nevada. Prior to that time, we had a lot of small miners and prospectors, and they played a big part in our economy. But then in the 1980s is when Newmont and Barrick and some of the bigger mining companies became interested in the gold fields, particularly here in central and northeastern Nevada. And that was an education in itself. I was, of course, politically active and working with others on the county level and on the state level, and we were trying to get our own people that would be bold in challenging the environmentalists and the environmental movement on the county level. And all of a sudden we had the mines opposing us. And first thing my recollection was an individual representing mining ran for county commissioner. He was late in filing for office, but he had all the big money behind him. He's large billboards showed up all over the county, and he was elected. And from then on, and it was right during that time when the Forest Service was implementing its most adverse actions against the ranchers. And we could make no headway any longer. The big mines, they had determined by then that it was much more advantageous for them to buy off these state and federal agency people than to fight them. That they could not win fighting, and they saw what we were doing as a problem, and they changed all that. Changed it, and I give them credit, the big corporations credit, for probably destroying the most vulnerable. The smallest ranchers in the state of Nevada were put out of business, and a big part of that came about by the miners. And of course, we want mining. Mining is not given enough credit for creating the standard of living that we all enjoy, that even wildlife benefit from. But that has been a problem for us ever since, trying to get that information about. That's part of what brought about the organization that we put together, trying to put this information together and get it out before the public. But you people were talking, I'd like to talk a little bit more here about the environmental movement, and you mentioned that a big part is played by the conservation organization, and that, yes, that's absolutely true. But from the research I've seen, the biggest player in all is those people within agencies. I ended up in my research going back and getting the records, the congressional records at the time when the Taylor Grazing Act was being proposed back in Congress. You know, it took 10 years to get that act through because there was a lot of resistance among the ranching communities of the West. And interestingly, in the testimony that was presented at the hearings and so forth, it was said again and again and again that it was not the general public that was asking for that legislation to protect the rangelands. It was those people within Interior and Agriculture and their buddies within other federal organizations. They were the ones that were testifying. The people representing the state of Nevada, the state of Wyoming, particularly Arizona and other western states, were saying, no, we have no problem. We're adjudicating these ranges ourselves. The problems all lie within or are articulated by those people that stand to gain the most from putting together these federal agencies. And then when I reached out further, I found that at that time when Agriculture and Interior wanting to gain control of these federal public lands, and they were using all the rhetoric saying that there was overgrazing, in fact, there was not overgrazing, that the wildlife were doing better than they ever had been, and there was no solid science supporting what they were saying. And since that time, I've come to understand that the greatest asset for federal agency people is false propaganda, lies, fraud, or whatever degree you want to speak out against this going on. But this false propaganda is the lifeblood of those people and agencies. They live by it. They want more funding. They want their agencies to grow. And the way they do that, there's got to be enemies. And the greatest enemy and the easiest enemy to campaign against is ranching and overgrazing. But of course it affects all, even users, recreational users on the public lands. So this stream of false propaganda has increased over the decades. And one of my projects has been going back and obtaining all the documents and all the instances whereby these agencies have used this false propaganda to gain leverage for themselves. And during this process, of course, fewer and fewer people were being associated or being raised in agriculture on farms and ranches. And so our general populace became more and more easily convinced that bad things were going on because they had no direct contact, no hands-on experience in the real communities. They had to rely on the so-called experts. And then, of course, it started infiltrating into the schools. And that has increased over a long period of time. So that's much of our problem today is the environmental thought and process and religion, I suppose you could call it, that is taught to the youth of America. And the problem is becoming, because really all of this is an attack on our American system of government, our Christian heritage, our Anglo-Saxon heritage, believing in free enterprise as the best way to provide for the good of a nation. And that includes wildlife. Wildlife exploded to it during that period of time when America was, it was part of our culture that we always saw that things were done efficiently and by the private sector and tried to keep government small. And now that's all reversed itself. In the community at Burns, one of the big problems we're having up there where the standoff occurred with the Bundys, 70% of the employment up there is state and federal people. So they outvote the private sector. There's no way you can win. Another interesting fact that I uncovered during my research was going back to the Constitutional Convention when they were adopting Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution, where discussion arose regarding how much land the federal government should own within amended states. It was very much expressed by those founders that one of their greatest fears was that should the federal government ever own vast amounts of lands or resources within a state, it would awe the state into undue obedience, destroy their independence. And that's precisely what has happened here in the West, and particularly in the state of Nevada, where we have somewhere between 87 and 90% of the land now owned and controlled by the federal government. They control our politics. So the bigger ranches that are now left, now that the small guys are gone, and the mining people, they know the only way they could get along is to kowtow to the conservation organizations, to the bureaucrats, and appease. So we live in a society of appeasement now, which is precisely what the founders were fearful of.
Exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take this opportunity to take a short break, and we will be back with more of this discussion in just a few minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Dan Happel. I appreciate the introduction to our commercial break. Ladies and gentlemen, we hold these radio shows throughout the month, particularly the Republic News Network. This show is Thursday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we're faithful to spreading the information and truth as much as we can throughout this national broadcast week in and week out. So this is kind of like a show for new people that are trying to get their feet wrapped around the corruption that's happening in and throughout the world and what we need to be doing to basically take steps in order to re-inhabit this republic nation. Many people don't understand what our founders truly gave us back in the late 1700s by dedicating their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, or what they let go of in their life, as many of them were killed in a variety of ways. Their land and everything was taken from them, so that we could have this opportunity to live under the Declaration and under the Constitution. It's a misnomer that people think that if you are a citizen of the United States that you have access to the Bill of Rights, and that's just the reason why we're doing this, is to spread the truth. You do not, according to the Supreme Court, have access to the Bill of Rights as a U.S. citizen. However, you do if you're an American, and there is a fundamental difference, and it's done contractually. So please spread this information to your friends so that your friends jump on these radio shows with you and help you learn and share this information. Forward this to people in your Facebook groups and your social media. Whenever and however, just do a copy and paste of the address link on the top and then send it on out. We really need your help to get this information out to the masses. The Connecting the Show dots with Dan Hampel is truly connecting the dots. It's helping people understand the corruption at the highest levels in this world. We also hold a Building the States call on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific. If you want to know how to participate in starting from scratch to re-inhabit your local county, municipality, and state, please join us 6 p.m. Pacific. You can get this information and all calls and or radio broadcasts at republicfortheunitedstates.org. Again, thank you, Dan, and I yield the floor.
You know, Jim, I guess your background and what you've been doing, you understand this very well, but radical environmentalism is anti-humanism. And I think we all recognize that the anti-humanist perspective in this is all part of a bigger program to, as Cliff said, change the nature of our culture and change our political system. As President Obama has said, and believe me, there's people in both parties before him that have been very interested in a fundamental transformation of our system from a Republican form of government, a constitutional republic, to a socialist democracy. And that being said, tell me what your information and your background in interviewing all these folks in the ranching community, how environmentalism really is anti-humanism. It would exclude the human being from the natural environment.
Sure, Dan. I'd be happy to comment on that. You know, we really Cliff touched on it briefly there. It's basically is a religion. It's a earth worship religion. It's a false religion. And of course, you know, as it says in the book of Ephesians, we battle not against flesh and blood, Dan. We don't battle against the actual environmentalist or that group. We battle against the spirit. And that's what we have. It really, when you break it all down to the brass tacks, in my view, and I'm sure that's why you had me on here to get my view, you know, it really is a spiritual battle. And these people that we're up against, I believe they really serve evil, and their intentions are evil. It's the hate humanity. You know, of course, God says, you know, be fruitful and multiply, and they say, euthanize those among us that are useless eaters, or are invalid or now elderly. That's the type of mentality. It's exactly the opposite of what God says and the promises He gives to us. They actually try to sing the exact opposite tune. And, you know, something else I've learned, too, they do that with the government, organized government. If you look at it, really, God made a certain promises, as I stated, and government wants to come in and usurp those promises, and it provide the promises that God gave us if we just turn away from sin and turn back towards, you know, Him and back towards His law. If we do that, He says He'll do certain things for us. Well, the government says, no, follow us and we'll take care of you. And sadly, Dan, many people have taken the easy road, and that's why we're in the state of affairs that we're in right now, in my view. And it goes down to the ranching, it goes down to the miners, it goes down to this corrupt political class that we have. We're on the heels right now of Hillary Clinton being really exonerated from crimes that any one of us on here, they would throw us away for 20 years and we wouldn't see the light of day. So we're really battling against an evil spirit, Dan. And I think we all have to put on the full armor, and it's like the Bible says, and that's really my view on things.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jim, I certainly was going to bring that up. The fact that Hillary Clinton, we've got a new political class that literally in this country is become above the law, that is totally in charge of everything, and they are really a royalty unto themselves, and that's something that our founders certainly did everything in their power to make sure that we did not have a system like that. Let's talk, and Cliff, you might want to throw your 2 cents in on this, but water is the new gold of the West, and it's being used to shut down a lot of the ranching and natural resource development in the West. And tell us some of your experiences on how they are using water to shut down the West.
Well, they haven't made a lot of inroads there yet, but that the handwriting is written, of course, that's probably one of their next big steps. The way I would explain it is during the time of settlement in the West, the Congress was trying to encourage people to come out and settle for purposes of claiming the lands in competition with Mexico, with Great Britain. That's what the Oregon movement was. Purpose of it was what came about in 1843, and of course, even at that time, there was also some indication that Russia was wanting interest. They'd already created a couple of settlements in California and up the coast into Alaska, and so there were people that were involved in politics on the national level that wanted to encourage settlement, and in order to do that, they made an effort to recognize people's right of preemption on the land. And those preemptive rights, as they materialized, particularly in 1866, when there was a specific act passed, headed by William Stewart, the first senator from the state of Nevada, that they recognized the people's right to ditch right-of-ways, road right-of-ways, to claim minerals, and to claim waters, even though those waters did rise upon the public lands. And so those were quite well established, and those doctrines were recognized for a long time. But then when we established these agencies, principally the Forest Service and BLM, they did not like the idea that they had the responsibility for managing these lands, but there were recognized rights out there that they couldn't really control. And so their efforts in all the history of Western land management has been with regards to trying to undermine those recognition of rights. And the least recognized, of course, was the rights to graze, and so that's where the first attacks came. And they later, much attack has occurred on ranching and recreation. Recreational rights were also recognized early on. But the most well-established recognition rights by Congress was that the states were going to adjudicate the waters and create the law that defined how those rights were recognized. So they have pretty well extinguished any recognition for grazing rights, water rights, ditch right-of-ways and road right-of-ways. Their next step is to extinguish the recognition of water rights. And, of course, once they get control of the water, particularly here in the West, then they will have the control of the land and resources and the people. And
well, we're kind of seeing that in Montana, Cliff, and one of the things that, and Jim's certainly familiar with this, but the Salish-Kootenai Compact is water's a huge part of that understanding, and that basically what happens with that is that the state loses their adjudication, their right to control the water, if it's on an Indian reservation or historical tribal lands. And so that's having an impact because that turns control of those state rights over to the federal government, and I think that may be the first step.
Hey, Dan, if I can interject.
Sure.
If I can interject, here's what I noticed about what you just said right there. The correlation that I can make with the ranchers. I've released 4 videos. The second video was a Mustang video about the Mustangs. What they've done really with the Mustangs is they're doing the same thing with in my view, the Native American tribes here in Montana. They're using them as sort of a battering ram, or they're using them as an excuse, in a sense, to be able to have control. They create I think, and Cliff can correct me, I want to say it was the Wild Horse and Burro Act in 1973. Is that right, Cliff?
71. The Wild Horse and Burro Act in 1971. Now, what's effectively happening here is these wild horses and burros are protected, Dan, and they're releasing them on these grazable lands, and they're eating up all of the land. And the farmers can't even, or the ranchers can't even. If you saw the one video I put out, they can't even feed them or water them or tend to them if they're sick, because it's a federal offense. Now, am I exaggerating on that, Cliff? Is that true, Cliff? Is that a true statement what Kevin said? The rancher's not allowed to even really get near those Mustangs. Is that accurate? Oh yes, it's a huge fine if you're even caught harassing the animals. But in what Dan was saying, I believe with regards to Indian reservations, I would give a little bit different perspective. But back in the 1980s and 90s, a big concern for we activists in the state of Nevada was the marriage between the conservation organizations and the federal agencies. The Nature Conservancy particularly, but other conservation organizations were doing a very good job of carrying on campaigns to preserve this area, to protect that area, and they would make the purchases. They worked or acted as land acquisition firms that would acquire those lands, and then they would turn it over to BLM, Forest Service, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, and they were increasing the size of the refuges and so forth. So my fellow activists and I put on a tremendous effort during that period to stop all that and expose the corruption, and we did, to a great degree, slow those people down. But I noticed at the same time, the agencies then took on another tack, and they started working through the Indian agencies and the reservations. And since then most of the land that they've acquired, most of the ranches that have been bought up and have been added to the federal government's coffers has been done through the reservation acts. In other words, yes, so many people say that the Indians are sovereign people out here. But no, when you get involved in politics, pretty soon you realize that those Indians, you have very little say about what goes on for politics on a reservation. It's completely controlled by the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, which I believe is also under Interior. Just like Fish and Wildlife Service and the BLM is under Interior. So they just shift lands back and forth, and they're all involved in the same politics. So now they're bringing more and more lands under federal control under the name of Indian reservations, and there's not quite as much resistance as there was before when Nature Conservancy was doing it.
And Cliff, your comment is excellent, because one of the things that they've done is that they've shifted the focus. When they hit resistance in one area, like Nevada, like groups like yours, start to resist these efforts on the part of the federal agencies and on the groups like the Nature Conservancy. They just shift their focus to another state. We've got the same thing going on in Montana right now through various agencies and various environmental groups, and they're doing things like the Blackfoot Challenge and the addition to the they call it the Crown of the Continent, but it's basically the entire spine of the Rocky Mountain mountain range in the state of Montana are coming under that kind of pressure. And what will happen is that the environmental groups will go in and act as an agent to purchase either the development rights or purchase the land outright from groups like Plum Creek, who, some of the various private entities that are logging and mining and so forth. And then they'll turn it over to a state or a federal agency and make a profit on it. And they're doing that in Montana on an ongoing basis right now. I know personally because I'm involved with a forest legacy group, and that's one of the roles is to take a look at that public land that's being picked up by environmental groups through conservation easements and so forth, and turn it over to state or federal control. So
one of the best examples I think that I've seen in my experience of how all the agencies and environmental groups and the various federal laws are all used in a coordinated manner to bring about the goal of bringing resources under control by the federal government happened in southern Nevada with regards to the desert tortoise issue. Of course, first they used the threat of the Endangered Species Act and to list the desert tortoise to restrict the ranching community and all economic activity down there. And, of course, they repressed the livestock industry in doing so, told them they had to be off the land for X number of months each year, which cannot occur in a desert environment like that. Next, here comes Nature Conservancy. They're going to help the rancher out, right? So they come in and offer a fairly good price, or still a reduced price, for their grazing rights or their ranch, and they buy it up, and then those rights, that land and that water ends up in the government hands, one way or the other. Down there where Clive and Bundy's at, as an example. Probably the most value that the Bundy family has right now is in their water rights. Las Vegas has bought up all their neighbors' water rights down the Mesquite River there. And those little ranches have all disappeared. The only ranch left down there is the Bundy Ranch. And they want their water rights. And they want them off the land to grazing. And so that water's worth a lot of money. So if it ended up in whoever's hands, there could be big profits made. There's huge profits have been made with regards to land trades in that Las Vegas area because, as an example, the Las Vegas Strip, Las Vegas has been landlocked for years, and the BLM has legislation on the books where they're supposed to make those lands available to the cities for expansion, but they refuse, drag their feet, and won't let that happen. Pretty soon there's bills come forward in the Congress that suggest that if somebody goes out and buys a ranch someplace, then that ranch land can be traded for land right along the Arizona Strip, and then that's subdivided. And there's a lot of corruption involved in those sorts of things, but it's been ongoing for 30, 40 years now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not exposed. I hope you guys do a better job than some of the rest of us have been doing in exposing it.
I hope we do too, and you've got probably one of the worst in the country in that regard is your senator there in the state of Nevada.
Oh my gosh!
Reed. But
my gosh, he's right up front in all of this.
Yeah,
that's the way he's become a multi-millionaire,
right?
If not a billionaire.
Right. Exactly.
Nothing happens in Nevada without Harry Reid.
That's right. That's right. I think you're completely on board with that. Jim, we're getting a little toward the end of the show here, but I wanted to mention the number of also good federal employees and how many are of the really good ones are now retiring or being forced to remain silent to protect their jobs. I've worked with a number of these folks that are like that. In fact, some of them are good friends. And the bottom line is they're being forced to do things that they don't feel comfortable with. But if they don't go along with the program, they're going to either lose their job or be forced into a very, very uncomfortable situation. And I know you've had some experience with that too. Could you kind of talk about what your experiences are as a result of the militarization of our federal land agencies and how some of them are really very resistant to what's going on as far as the changing in the agencies?
Indeed, Dan. Back when I was broadcasting, of course, I'd had many law enforcement officers, former law enforcement officers, former military, on the broadcast, and certainly we were always, a fan of law enforcement, because there is really the fact of the matter is there is a large majority of people that really serve that are regular folks like us. They just want to do right by their family and do right by other people. But they are, unfortunately caught up into a system, Dan, where they feel, trapped. They've spent, a lot of usually, maybe schooling time and energy into being where they're at. And actually, they like working with the public. They like people, but they just, the management, I think you mentioned it earlier. There seems to be, I don't know how anybody could really not look at the whole picture like in a chessboard and realize that it really is an agenda. It really is a much larger agenda. Like Cliff had mentioned, they start first with the rancher because they're the easy target. They're going to move on to the next person. That's an agenda. This isn't something that happens by chance. This is a planned thing. And these people, unfortunately, in these agencies become pawns of those in charge that are trying to really, and I think Cliff mentioned earlier, change the way that we live. Change our life. So. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. Mostly, I'll tell you one thing, Dan, and if I can just mention real quick, and I think you're probably an advocate of this as well. You talk about law enforcement. If we actually had the constitutionally mandated citizen militia, we wouldn't really need nearly as many police. But that's a topic certainly for another show.
Well, that's actually a topic of a program that we're going to have in about a month. So we will be connecting that dot as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we're toward the end of our program here, and I would like to give Jim and Cliff an opportunity to talk very briefly about projects that they're working on and how they can, how our listening public can become involved with some of the things that they're working on. So that being said, Cliff, we get about a minute here. If you would just kind of wrap up briefly what you're working on, and then we'll give Jim a similar opportunity to speak.
Yes, thank you. Right now I'm really primarily just trying to catch up with bringing some of my past photography work and research work up to date, where it could be more usable and more presentable to the general public. But I'm also working with Jim. I think Jim's project is very, very important. We have a lot of people within the state of Nevada, people I've known for many, many years that are getting up in age, that have had direct experiences with the federal government. They have a story to tell. These stories involved the effectiveness of predator control and the adversity of government shutting down effective predator control, as well as wild horse problems and overgrazing problems by those animals, and the disinformation, of course, that is disseminated by the agency folks. And so Jim and I are going around the state. We're going to be making another round here beginning on Thursday. And many of the people we're interviewing are in their 80s and 90s. And so it's critically important to get that, have them testify and have that testimony on record. So I feel very good about that. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay, thank you. Jim, would you like to speak a little bit about your the project you're working on right now called Operation Wildlife Rescue?
Indeed, thanks, Dan. I appreciate again the opportunity. And yeah, Cliff pretty much nailed it. My goal, as I said, I hung up my microphone here, and this is it. You know, right now for me, this is the next project that's on my heart, is to do what we're doing now, working with Cliff closely. Really, if you could sit and speak with Cliff more, you really need to just have Cliff on, because Cliff is really, really, really smart. He knows a lot of stuff about the history. He can talk for hours about that stuff, and I'm really delighted to be working with him. You can go to northwestlibertynews.com/Operation Wildlife Rescue. It's northwestlibertynews.com/Operation Wildlife Rescue, and I'll be posting all the videos. I've got 4 videos there. I've got another probably 3 or 4 videos in the can that I just haven't had time in between my visits to Nevada to really process. But when I get back after this next trip here the next couple of days, I'll have all the material on hand, and I'll just start putting out these videos one after another, and then hopefully in the very end I'll have a full-length documentary that I'm going to take a lot of the parts of these videos I'm shooting and put them all together, with a common theme, and that's really the goal and what I'm praying for.
Okay, well, great. That's and incidentally, Cliff, I have to make this comment. This is the thing that concerns me more than anything else. You need to figure out a way to microfilm or in some way make sure that your records are replicated a number of times so that we don't have an unusual or unexplainable fire or something that wipes out all those years of work. And believe me, you can't imagine how important those records are to the American citizen, because as you said earlier, we're all in this boat together, and if they can do it to one, if they can take out ranching, they can take out every other liberty-minded group or individual in this country. So just because they're only going after one area doesn't mean that they're not going to go after all those areas. So,
I hear you, and I need to get that done.
Yes.
Well, if I can interject, I can give you my personal guarantee, Dan. That is already in the works. I've already got the wheels in motion to have all that information cataloged, for generations to come. So I give you my word that I'll have that done here probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Well, that's great, because I think that is absolutely essential. As Cliff said, there's not a lot of science. One thing about the science of environmentalism, it isn't a science, it's a religion. And because it's a religion and not a science, it's pretty easy to prove how false it really is. So, well, thanks again, guys, for being part of our show today. This has been a terrific discussion. We will continue connecting the dots for folks in the weeks to come. We've got a friend of both of you gentlemen, Hank Vogler, will be on in 2 weeks with Judy Boyle, and they will be talking about much of the problem that happened with the Hammond Ranch and the Hammond family, and for that matter, the Bundy family in Burns, Oregon, as well as the death of Lavoy Finicum. And we need to make sure that folks tune in, because we are going to continue to connect the dots. And with that said, Kelby, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to conclude our show with Mr. Dan Happel and Connecting the Dots for this week. Again, please join us next Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific. God bless. Good night.